Mayor Wu, it's you brought butternut squash with you. Is that what you brought?
I did.
Nice that you did.
And some other things.
Nice
too.
to
Oh,
see you.
my
Let's hear it
goodness.
from Mayor Michelle Wu.
Well,
How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm managing after all that's happened in the world, and so I wanted to keep it local. This is a box of goodies from Sikowski Farms in
Whoa.
Hadley.
I was kidding.
And it includes some squash. It includes, anyway, I'll back up and say I was out there, a couple-hour drive west, about a month and a half ago to visit this farm because they are one of the suppliers for our Boston Public Schools lunches.
Great.
We're now sourcing about 15% of our BPS food ingredients from local farms in Massachusetts and New England. Our goal is to more than double that. And it was amazing to see where those squash and broccoli and beans and other vegetables are grown, and to meet the hands, the farmers who are putting all of that care into feeding our young people. And we talked about how important it is to support the local economy. So Farmer Joe Sikowski is a legend in the area. He has also patented this butternut squash veggie spiral. So these are for you all as
Thank
well.
you very
There's
kindly.
lots of products in here.
That is
I'm a
very kind of
huge
you, I
butternut
should
squash
say.
person, I want you to know.
By the way, Mayor Wu also answered another question I'm sure all of us have had for
Yep.
decades. The plural of squash is squash. She just
I think-
said
is it
it, and I would
squashes?
say
I think so.
I think it's
I think it's squash.
I
In any
don't
case,
know.
Thank
I
you,
don't
Mayor Wu,
know.
and it's good to see you. Thank
to
you
see
for
you.
joining us.
So Jim was just talking about, his reaction to the election. He was very upset about the deportation part of this, and there are stories in the Globe and all around the country about a lot of people who are petrified about what's going to happen to them. But what did you think about what happened last Tuesday?
I'm still sitting very heavily with the impact of what this means, just sort of knowing very closely the tangible ways that life may change for the city of Boston, just based on what I experienced under a previous administration like this and what we've experienced under the Biden-Harris administration. And, the way that our electoral system works, the country has voted, and we are going to have to accept the consequences of that. But that does mean that local communities are going to have to deal with a whole lot more than, just to maintain where we were and not get pulled back
How so?
into.
What kind of things are you talking about?
We are a community here in Boston that is 29% foreign-born residents. Our immigrant community members are a very important part of our community, and the threats, we saw even after 2016 that it's not just how much is actually coming to fruition, and I do believe that this go-round comes with a lot more preparation and a lot more readiness to take action than before.
With Trump, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you see and feel the impact in the community when students don't show up for school anymore, regardless of how clearly we have laid out policies in Boston with the Trust Act being signed in 2014 and specific protections where our local law enforcement does not coordinate on federal immigration enforcement. When the fear is there, it completely changes how residents feel comfortable interacting with our school system, with city services, coming to the library, engaging with law enforcement or first responders, and that makes everyone less safe.
So can we talk about the thing that we were talking about as you were walking in, which is, to me, it's hard to rate the worst of the agenda, but apparently this is a day one item. This mass deportation thing, we're a sanctuary city. What do you say to people who are living in the kind of fear you talked about? What is the city and the state going to do to protect them?
So it's important to know that there are laws on the books already here in Boston. And again, as early as 2014, we as a city passed protections with, I should say, full support of local government leaders and law enforcement leaders. The Boston Trust Act puts strict prohibitions on local law enforcement from being pulled into becoming the enforcement arm for the whims of whatever the sort of approach of federal immigration law might be. There are certain exceptions when there's a for example, a particular type of warrant around particular types of criminal activity where, and coordination allowed that around human trafficking and drug trafficking and cyber crimes and some specific instances. But the idea that certain local law enforcement agencies will be required or will be expected to participate in mass deportations of residents who have not been part of serious criminal activity just to fulfill this campaign promise, this is not something that is possible under the laws in Boston.
When you say not possible, they would get assistance from local law enforcement. But does that stop federal authorities from carrying out Trump's mass deportation plans in Boston without the assistance of the locals?
So, I mean, we are trying to figure out, and we're going to be working very closely. We have some conversations already mapped out with those who will know best and how to manage for every bit of scenario planning in this instance. I think there are, capacity limitations at different levels, and some of what has been promised does rely on having the full cooperation of local agencies. Now, in places where that is not the case, how much could still happen and how much is going to be pushed, we still have other mechanisms where we can identify spaces that might be most targeted and think about protections there. So we're working through all of that internally now. And, 69 days to go until inauguration. We're counting that down.
By the way, the number, and you can start lining up, I'm sorry, Margery, is 877-301-8970. We'll get to your calls and texts in a few minutes.
But Mary, one of the things that was really clear in this election is that a lot of talk about the Democrats losing the working class. And one of the things we've learned is many working class voters, including people who are recent immigrants themselves, felt a huge resentment to the numbers of people that were coming into their cities and towns. And I remember when for the brief period, it was only a few months, but the Melnia Cass Recreation Center was closed for a while, and kids in Roxbury, their programs were lost. That was used as a place for migrants to live. There was a resentment, the idea that these people, in quotes, are not going to Wellesley or Brookline. They're going to the Bostons and the Lawrences and the Fall Rivers and New Bedford, and people feel that their schools have been impacted. People feel that their rents have been impacted. These concerns are real. So how do you bridge those two divides,
I think with or without immigration as the sort of most visible issue, whenever, it's somewhat human nature that when you feel like you are losing out, when you feel like you don't have enough of what you need or you're not able to support your own family, there's a little bit of sort of shutting down in terms of understanding where the opportunities might be going instead. And we have the ability in a country that is as well resourced as the United States and in many cities and communities to move out of that dynamic, but it has to start with moving away from this sort of shrinking pie, because that naturally leads to pitting different communities against each other. And we have, I think, been working very hard in Boston and in Massachusetts to be the example of a community that is safe, that is welcoming, that is growing, that is striving to have enough resources for all. Now, we are, in some ways, have been such a desirable place to live that our housing stock is now far below what it needs to be, given the demand and the interest in living here. And that, I think, is one of the biggest barriers that we need to understand, is how do we demonstrate and communicate that it's possible for everyone in our communities to thrive. We do need more coordination and resources. If anything, we need more funding from the federal government around housing, transportation, infrastructure. The results of having the federal pandemic relief funds have been very clear in terms of expanding who has access to opportunity and how we incorporate everyone into the strongest version of our society. But the housing shortage, the feeling of grocery prices being out of control, costs being out of control all around the country, that really had an impact on the election.
It's a day after Veterans Day. I just want to mention in terms of housing, you have something to talk about in terms of veterans housing. Tell us about that.
Well, we took the step of trying to move as quickly as possible in adopting a provision that was made available through the HERO Act that was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor, which allows for a greater property tax exemption for veterans now in the city of Boston. We've opted in. And so just, one additional measure to try to cushion what can be very difficult in a high cost of living community.
A couple of more election questions quickly if we can, and then we'll get to your calls at 877-301-8970. We did some back-of-the-envelope math this morning. I hope it's right, and correct me if I'm wrong. Turnout from 2020 in the presidential down from 293,000 to just under 250,000. You're nodding in agreement. Trump's percentage of the vote went up 5%. Briefly, how do you explain both of those?
Well, some of this is there was just widespread mail voting in 2020. And so the changes because of the pandemic for public safety, or for public health and safety, meant that more people were being proactively mailed ballots, I think, in many places. And that availability definitely expanded the electorate in ways that we had not seen prior to that. Mail-in voting remains a really big source of how the votes come in, even in the non-presidential elections that have happened since 2020.
So you think it explains that huge drop?
No, I mean, it's also true in communities everywhere that Democratic turnout was lower, and I'm not familiar with all of their mail versus not mail, but I think people might have felt like again, a lot of confusion around various issues and the interplay of it, or the mix of social media and what information was getting across, the feeling of whether our votes actually mattered that much when there wasn't something else sort of high profile on the ballot here. It's impossible a week after the election to really untangle the sort of many influences and impacts on how people made their decisions. We are just going to have to have those conversations and ask those questions, and then be prepared to take the feedback that we get and make some changes.
Do you feel like you were an active surrogate for originally for Biden, then for Harris? Do you feel you or any of the other Democratic leaders failed? I mean, this is a 5% increase in the Democratic city of Boston. Margery's from Fall River, one of the bluest cities, went for Trump. Did the Democratic infrastructure in the state not do their job well enough?
I think there are, again, a lot of different pieces to this that it's hard to untangle, and I believe that the shift in social media was a factor in this, right? The fact that one of the biggest platforms is owned by someone, a billionaire, who really by the end, through the algorithms and everything else, you could not sign on to that site without seeing the direct political push from the owner.
We're obviously talking about Elon Musk and
who's
Twitter,
going to be
X,
now very active in setting up what comes next. Okay. And, so in times where I think there's been a disintegration of trust in politics and government, especially at the federal level, local institutions become all the more important. State and local government, libraries, schools, local media, having this platform as a way for people to still feel like they can get access to some of their elected officials and ask questions on a regular basis. That has always been important for democracy, and even more important now. We're seeing Blue Sky, for example, as an alternative or another option for social media. I have sort of jumped back in on that one and have seen the swell of people moving over to that platform, which has different controls around how you can regulate for more productive conversations and block some of the toxicity, or even sort of remove some of the bots and those who are not actually real people on that platform. And we are going to need that kind of infrastructure to rebuild from the ground up how people get information, how people share their views, how they can trust the information that they see, and then turn that into actual action at the policy level.
Two more very quick election things, and we finally get to the calls, I promise. There was a mess, inadequate number of ballots at a number of polling places. The Secretary of State apparently is appalled. I assume you're upset too. Bill Galvin said a receivership, as happened once in the past, might be the appropriate course. Would you support a receivership for the election commissioner?
I think the city, the administration, we welcome any resources and support and partnership with the Secretary of State's office. There's really no one else around the country that has as much experience and knowledge in terms of how elections should run. And it is unacceptable. I mean, there's no other way to describe it as compared to, it's just unacceptable.
Do you know why they weren't even answering the phones? I mean, that's the thing that is most incredible.
Yeah, so I will say, we're doing in addition to working with the Secretary of State's office, we're doing our own deep internal review just to understand every piece of what happened. That will take a little bit of time because the elections department, as every department, has had some really important closeout work to do. There's, some of the overseas ballots are still coming in, and there are some regularly scheduled audits that happen just to double check and triple check election results. So they've had additional responsibility since then, and we will get to all of it deeply once those are concluded. But the initial review suggests that there was a mistake in the formula and a new formula that was created because now with mail-in ballots being a larger part of the electorate, they've been setting new protocols around which ones are counted in advance centrally versus which ones are sent back to the precincts on election day to be fed into the machines. And in some of the formulas around accounting for those precincts, they shortchanged how many ballots were needed at the other precincts. And mistakes happen. Mistakes happen across any large institution, any organization. The question is, why did it then get to a point where people were not able to respond as quickly, and what did that response look like? And so that I think is the bigger focus of how do we ensure that we have systems that are redundant and have multiple ways where no single issue becomes then a reason for undue delay that can lead to disenfranchisement.
Let's take some calls.
Paul and Braintree, you are first with Mayor Michelle Wu. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Paul.
Well, thank you, Margery, Jim, Honorable Mayor. My question really seems inconsequential by today's standards, but it's the condition of Boylston Street. It's nearly impossible to navigate it, let's say, from the Prudential Center to Arlington Street.
Amen, Paul.
Between the valet parking, the bus lane, the bike lane, it kind of resembles now Hanover Street the day before Thanksgiving. I mean, it's just, I don't know why it's in that condition, but it's just impossible as a driver to go, as I do every Sunday now, from the Prudential Center down to Arlington Street. So basically, that's my question.
Okay.
I hope you can address it.
You want to know what you can do about it. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate the feedback. I think, some of the changes that we're having to make in different parts of our street design citywide is because traffic has become an overwhelming concern. And given Boston's historic narrower streets, there's only so much that we can do in terms of trying to find new space for travel. We have to move more people on the space that we already have. And as more vehicle traffic has happened, that becomes increasingly dangerous for all, pedestrians, cyclists, everyone else who's using the roadways as well. And so some of the separation is to make sure that there are ways where heavily trafficked areas that have a large proportion of public transit or other modes of transportation, that those can be efficient and safe. The changes that were put in place on Boylston Street, I think we continue to measure what the impact is, and we'll be able to report back on all of that. It takes a little while sometimes for all the street changes to settle, but by and large, we wanted to create separation so that there was not just a jumble and a chaos of who drives where, what having to worry about someone darting over or being in front and mixed in. And so from a safety perspective, we do prioritize making sure that our streets are safe for
Mayor
everyone.
Wu, I would like to commend the traffic department for a way I drive every time I leave here, which is a new change in the light at the corner of Boylston Street and Dartmouth Street. So drivers are not running over the pedestrians who are trying to cross at the walk sign there. They've changed the light so you're not going back and forth, and it's a big improvement. So
Okay,
whoever
speak
did
for
that.
yourself. So can we do something
Well,
upbeat?
okay. First of all, I will say sometimes what gets interpreted as causing traffic is actually not as related to it. And so what we know from the data is that traffic doesn't usually come from the number of lanes or this or that. It's from how you use the curb and how the signals are timed. So having
Exactly.
the lights actually match up makes a big, big difference.
Signals,
Having spaces
they're
where
huge.
you have takeout spaces for 5 minutes or 15 minutes instead of people then having to double or triple park, that makes a big difference too. Getting transit lanes prioritized where the buses tend to be stopping every so often and blocking everyone, that makes a difference. We've been, I think I might have shared this before on this show a couple months ago, but we're one of 2 cities working with Google right now to use AI and machine learning to analyze the data they have on where traffic pops up, because they have the, the red, yellow, green on their Google Maps. And in the places where we have used that data and changed the light timing, where the lights actually were too short or too long in one direction or another with the cross street, we've seen stop and go traffic go down by 50%. So we need to do more of that in really understanding what are the tweaks that we can still make to just make sure the streets are moving as well as they can in their current condition, and then what are the larger changes that are needed.
Can we go one street over for some upbeat news from my perspective? What's happening on Newbury Street in December?
For the first time ever, we are having a holiday open Newbury. This was from feedback from some of the merchants and small business owners who are on Newbury Street that, in fact, having a dedicated focus on holiday shopping could be a big benefit. And so I don't remember the exact dates off the top of my head. 1st and 8th of December, Newbury Street will be closed to vehicular traffic in order for pedestrians and everyone to come out and enjoy and get your shopping done locally.
Jill in Concord, you're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about, I'm getting an echo.
Well, I know it's
It's
only
okay.
on your end, and our apologies.
Yep.
Just keep talking. We're fine here. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I'll try to talk and
I'm
not
so
listen
sorry.
to myself.
Yep.
I have a question about projects that are in the pipeline for climate mitigation. And I understand that the city has to have a balanced budget, and so they haven't counted on the money from the IRA. But I'm expecting that the Trump administration will try to get out of paying that money, and I'm wondering if there are any efforts to try to get that money before the projects are, quote, fully operational, which is the language in the IRA.
We got it. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
your call.
Jill.
Thank you. This has already been an area of great focus for us locally and in conversations with the current administration federally as well, that all the federal dollars that we have been awarded, we need to know what is the plan for being able to guarantee as much as possible that they will be spent and that we are minimizing the risk that they might be withdrawn or canceled. And so those are for the ones that have already been awarded. The other projects, provisions that are available under the Inflation Reduction Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or some of the other provisions that were passed, there still may be a period of time where legislation has to be changed before something happens. And so we're working to go as fast as we can in analyzing that and spending what we can spend to get those projects out the door and funded.
Jill, thanks for the call.
We got to take a break, but real quick before we do, a texter says that the new bridge from Charlestown to Boston is beautiful, but the texter wants to know, since it's dedicated to Bill Russell, the former great player on the Boston Celtics, could the bridge be lit with green lights instead of blue lights, especially on nights that the Celtics are playing? What do you think, Mayor Wu?
That's an interesting one, right?
I think
it's
so.
like the light that shows what the weather is
Yeah, the
at certain days.
Hancock.
And this would be what showed. Well, we'll probably need a Bruins color too for Bruins
That's
games.
right.
So anyway,
I've
I'll
just-
look into it.
Okay. We're talking to the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. She's going to be with us till the top of the hour, taking our questions and yours and your texts as well, as many as we can fit in. 877-301-8970 is the number.
trusted, local news.
Massport is aggressively expanding its seaport-based cruise ship business.
44 new vessels will cascade into the market between now and 2028.
GBH News.
Spewing their foul air.
You know, it's just not sustainable to keep going bigger and bigger and bigger endlessly.
Here for what matters to you. GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And the University of New England, offering undergraduate and graduate programs in Portland, Maine, on the ocean in Biddeford, Maine, in Morocco, and online. The University of New England, une.edu. And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com. And Blythewald, presenting the big, beautiful bamboo birds. Bamboo sculptures ranging in size from 15 to 30 feet tall. Visitors can see the giant owl, queenfisher, peahen, and more all around the gardens. Tickets at blythewald.org.
The annual UN Climate Change Conference, COP29, is underway in Baku, Azerbaijan. Delegates from nearly 200 countries are mapping out a global green energy transition. We hear about that vision and how it might be impacted by the re-election of Donald Trump. That story and more international news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery, Eagan, Jim Braude. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined by the mayor of Boston, as she's kind enough to do every month for an hour until the noon hour. You can call or text her at 877-301-8970. Before I go back to the calls, I want, on Margery's behalf and mine, I want to apologize for this everyday echo thing that a lot of you are struggling with. We're mortified. We're really working hard to fix this, and we hope the fix is imminent, so our sincere apologies. Another Margery in Charlestown, talking to Mayor Wu. Hello there, Margery.
Hi, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
Hi.
I think you're fabulous, which is why I want to ask for your insight about this horrible situation whereby our students, especially in East Boston High School, I read that article in the Globe about the athletes being stranded at their school because a school bus never came to pick them up to take them to their games. And I understand that it's not just East Boston, it's English High School and a couple others. I just really want to know what you're going to do about it.
And by the way, that game had to be canceled because there was no bus to take them from East Boston.
It was just terrible.
Yeah. Mayor Wu, thank you, Margery.
Thanks, Margery. Yeah, I am keeping tabs as well from my household. My fourth grader you're eligible to play on the elementary school soccer team once you get into fourth grade, and so he's been going every morning before school, waking up early to get there for practice. And they also had a game canceled because of similar bus issues, and another one that had to be majorly delayed. And you know, you just, as a parent, you feel the impacts of that. And this is a long-standing issue that we are working very hard on. I think the biggest the biggest underlying issue is that we need to have this baked into contracts with our drivers, and therefore the availability of buses, the guarantee that those routes will be bid on and covered. And so I know our drivers work incredibly hard, and we've already seen remarkable improvements over the first couple months of school in implementing the new app that's going to help us do even better in terms of on-time pickup and drop-off for school itself. But having the extracurriculars covered also is really important. We had an issue, you know, again, just from my own child's perspective, where when a regular school bus or one of the yellow school buses wasn't available, they actually went to one of the other coach buses, and then that one was too big to even turn down the street of the school, and then they were stuck for 30 minutes anyway trying to get the police department to tow a car so they could make the turn. And so these are things that should not be part of what students, student athletes, school educators, and families have to think about. It should be a given that you put in the time, you play sports, you are involved in the arts, you have a field trip. Transportation should just be seamless, and we're working really hard to get there.
Margery, thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970.
Just one more thing about this. Is it that the traffic is terrible? I mean, I get the bus with the football players, that was different, but the lateness thing, is that what's going on? I mean, why does this happen? I know it's better, but
in general, just to get to school?
Yeah.
So we're actually already at and exceeding where the district has been in previous years with on-time performance by this point. The first couple weeks were rocky because for the first time ever, they were moving away from a clipboard and paper routing system to an app that actually showed real-time GPS data, as well as checking off which students were getting on and off the bus at each stop. Previously, we never knew which students were actually riding the bus and whether they made it or not. And so now families have access to seeing exactly where their student is. They get an estimated drop-off time based on the GPS data that accounts for traffic. And feedback from community members has been very good that this is now, you just have a peace of mind. It took a while to get used to how that system was implemented, both with the GPS data that was uploaded every week, and now we're at the point where we're starting to be able to really understand how to make even more improvements. Every year, other year before this, we kind of topped out at how well we could do with on-time performance, and now, given these new tools and a little bit more access to technology, we still have improvements that we're confident that we can continue improving that number for the rest of the year.
Bob, if you approach the mic here, we'll get to you right after this next question, so you're ready to go. Can you give us a quick update on what's happening with the tax shifting commercial to residential to commercial shift that you negotiate with the business community? Have you gotten an assurance from the Senate leadership that now that business is on board, there's going to be a yes vote there?
I think the legislature was quite clear that they wanted to see consensus from particular stakeholder groups that included the business community. We got there, and it's been, I think recognized that took a lot of work and was exactly what they were hoping for. It passed through the city council with a 12-1 vote, and was just filed last week up at the State House by Rep. Rob Consalvo, who also took it last time around. And so now it would have to move through those same channels with the House and then the Senate. There's a little wrinkle because of now they're in informal session versus formal session, but we are pushing hard and just trying to manage the clock at this point.
But no assurance yet from the Senate.
I think the Senate was pretty clear that they wanted to see some changes. Mm-hmm. We updated and amended the legislation with all of those changes and are following their guidance and their requests for how to feed that back through the process. So at this point, I believe the city has done everything that we need to do in coming to consensus and having lots and lots of discussions on how to measure and prove what the impact would be. And now we are just watching the legislative process.
Okay, very quick response. I assume you saw Joan Vanacchi's column saying, is she full of resolve or stubborn? Which are you?
I mean, I never imagined I would be potentially described as more stubborn than Mayor Menino.
Fair enough.
Having known the mayor,
I wonder why that could be.
I take it as a good thing. I'm going to fight for our residents no matter what it takes. And at the end of the day, that particular issue that she was highlighting, we got it done. We reached consensus, and residents will be far better for it.
Bob is here at the mic at the library. Welcome, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mayor, great to see you. Glad you're in City Hall. It was just a joyous occasion to see you become mayor of the city. And I have to say, it's a pleasure listening to you. I love hearing you're very articulate in what you say, and I think very forthcoming as well. So I'll also add I was an election poll worker last 4 elections. It's been great to be on the inside to see how everything works. Very reassuring. So thank you for all that you're doing there. I have a question actually about bike lanes and traffic. I've noticed with all the changes, I do like a lot of the changes to the roadways, The traffic, the bike lanes, they seem to be getting better. Unfortunately, I'm also noticing that a lot of the bike lanes are put on the worst surfaces of the roads, on the sides. And I just actually had an accident last week, angry from the election, went out biking, and I had a spill because of the road surfaces. What can we do about improving these road surfaces, and how can we make it easier to report these problems?
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, and thank you for highlighting that. The importance of our infrastructure decisions can't just stop once the design has been made. It's really very much about maintenance, about ease of accessibility, and how, as you point out, that continues to happen year after year after year, even after the change potentially has been made. So 311 is still the best and fastest way to report issues, whether it is in the car lane or the bike lane or a street light. We pride ourselves on having very strict customer service standards, so that with potholes, for example, the goal is to fill them with a specific turnaround. When the weather gets colder, it gets a little bit more complicated in terms of the temperature that's needed to do that. But the best way for us to be able to respond to those structurally is to know where they are and then have that get into our system.
Mayor Wu, one of the great embarrassments, at least to me, in Boston and my hometown of Cambridge, it was the pathetically low percentage of city contracting that went to black and brown-owned businesses. I know in Boston it was somewhere in the 1.2% range a couple of years ago. In Cambridge it was under 1%. I know there's been an increase. How significant are we talking about?
Yeah, we have, so just this last year, we have hit more than $100 million going to what are called MWBE businesses, Minority and Women Business Enterprises is the technical term. And we have seen, even last year to this year, a 40% jump. I think we are, I think the number is somewhere around 12, 15.
That's including women-owned businesses, though, right?
I don't believe, okay, I'll make sure I get the exact numbers. We have had a very big swing in this, increase in this, and it's because of changes in policy that were put in place around how RFPs are going out, changes in measurements, more certification processes, more outreach to make sure that we are getting businesses in the door. And recently, Cambridge reached out to us, and we're very proud to sign an MOU with that city, whereby they're looking to increase their numbers as supplier diversity numbers as well, but rather than starting from scratch, they're now partnering with Boston. So we will help certify businesses in Cambridge that could qualify for MWBE certification, and they will source their purchasing from the entire pool, including Boston certified MWBE. So it's a win-win all around, and we've now set up the infrastructure with tracking, dashboards, planning out in advance what those contracts will be so that companies can get ready. And it's a good model for any other governments or really any other major purchasers, the hospital industry, the higher ed. There are lots of ways in which we could be supporting our local economy.
Ali from Cambridge, you're on with the mayor. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Ali.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for taking my call. I have two questions that I try to be very brief. The first one is the question that Margery asked, and I believe Mayor Wu dodged it, so I have to repeat it. So the resources of the city are limited from accommodation, medical centers, and the rest of those. And there are illegal immigrants and also regular citizens. City decided to bring and give those limited resources to those illegal immigrants, and therefore hurting the regular citizen. That's my question number one. Question number two is that the nation has voted, not only by electoral vote, but also by popular vote. And the President-elect Trump, on the top of his policies, was deporting of illegal immigrants. Now you are, that you have been always pretending that defending democracy, planning to use more resources of the city to confront the will of the people. What is the justification?
Ali, we got it.
We got it.
We understand them both. Mayor.
So, okay, so I think I want to try to understand your first question also was, whether we are taking resources away from residents who are not undocumented, whether it's immigrants who have legal status and citizens, taking that away in order to give to undocumented residents. I think that's a little bit of an unfair characterization. Oftentimes, actually most often, the city is using sources of funding to address particular challenges, and especially in this case, that come from the federal or state government that are designated for specific purposes. And so often we are drawing on grants or funding from the federal government that are to manage a shelter system where we have new immigrant families or at the city level, individuals arriving. And it's not as if that funding was transferable to other uses, and it's not as if we all of a sudden changed our budget and decided to take funding that was allocated for another purpose and redirect it to that instead. That is at the city level. There might be other conversations at other levels of government. So I think it's, we understand, for example, that shelter space is limited, but so far the city of Boston has really, really stretched along with our partners, and we are doing our best to manage the crises that have been presented to us with the resources that we have. But that does not come, I do not subscribe to the idea that we had changed our budget in order to do that. Again, this is just to the city level. The second point that you make about whether Boston, in some of our actions, for example, around, maybe you're referring to the earlier conversation where we are not having local law enforcement carry out the full instructions of the federal immigration enforcement agencies, is that contradicting the will of the people? If you look at the will of the people in Boston, nearly 80% of residents voted for the Harris campaign and that ticket. And so, maybe if we were living in a different part of the country, if we were, responding at a different level of government, but our charge here is to take care of the residents of Boston and to use the resources that we have from all the sources that are available to get things done on the issues that matter in Boston. That has been our charge before last Tuesday's election, and it continues to be. And so we're very specific in what we focus on at the local level, and we're also very, very clear that Boston always intends to be a community where we highlight what is possible when everybody benefits from our community being welcoming, safe, prosperous across each and every part of that community.
Thank you.
Ellen in the North End.
I'm sorry. I thought we were going to Ellen, quickly if you can, because we want to try to get Rachel in here too. Quickly, Ellen.
Hi, Jim. This is Ellen Hume. I'm a fan of Mayor Wu. That was literally the issue I was trying to ask about. I know Boston's a sanctuary city, and people are wondering what we can do to help protect some of the workers and others who've been here for many years without documents, who are really important part of our community. Is there going to be a task force or someone we can contact to be helpful?
Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen. Great to hear from you. I think there are many local organizations that have for a very long time been advocating on behalf of immigrant residents, whether that is MIRA, the Mass Immigrant Refugee Alliance, I'm not exactly sure what A is, or Lawyers for Civil Rights, or other groups that are various worker centers. We are going to be working closely to get their best insights and directions on what to do. And we will be formulating some of those plans and sharing them out.
Rachel at the library, we only have a couple of minutes left, so brief if you can, please.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wu. It's actually my dream job to be the mayor of Boston, so it's such an honor. My question is specifically what's being done to address the cost of housing in Boston. Myself, I'm 27. Every single one of my friends, it is the number one issue of why we would move out of state. It is too insane to buy anything apartment, house here. So thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you a lot. You have about a minute and a half.
Thank you. Okay, you should come work for the city then, if that's the case. We should talk. You're absolutely right, and this is why we are throwing everything we have at housing. We use the majority of our federal recovery dollars for housing affordability, for moving the pipeline forward on housing that's already been permitting more affordable housing, using city land to create more space to drive down the costs of what it would take. We're also reviewing every bit of our internal development processes just to make the processes more streamlined, faster, more predictable, because we don't want to add to any part of the cost of what it takes to build. We will never be the lowest land cost community. We're very dense. We'll never be the lowest labor cost community. We have very high standards around labor. And so we need to make sure that the regulations are smooth and efficient and as streamlined as possible. And we also are trying our best to boost home ownership, partner with outside entities, taking some of our reserves funding and creating a revolving fund that will come back into the reserves after it closes the gap in financing for some projects, brings them back in. We have about 30,000 units of housing in Boston that are already permitted or already approved, but have not started construction. If we can just get those over the line, that in and of itself will be a huge impact in the supply.
30 seconds. Is any of the $4 billion housing bond bill that the governor standing right there says the largest in the state's history, any of it trickle down to Boston quickly?
Yes, so
already?
There's funding around office to residential conversions. There's funding for more creation of public housing. Okay. There's funding around the Momentum Fund that would spark private developments. And so some of these are yet to be fully allocated at the local level, but Boston definitely will qualify.
You didn't know how you were going to vote on the MCAS question. How'd you vote?
So, okay, and how many minutes do we have?
30 seconds.
Okay.
How'd you vote? We'll continue it next month.
I voted no. And not because I believe that the MCAS is what we should be holding up, but because if the question were just around the city of Boston, I would have voted yes, because I know we're prepared with Common Core and a lot of the other changes, but not every district around the state is prepared, and for the standards to disappear without the resources to guarantee staffing, that is more concerning. But we should talk more.
We will talk
Yes,
more
we
next
will.
month. It's great to see you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your time.